Welcome again to the Preseen application. Now let's continue our story. With regards to part 2 here, that we can see the Historic Places charity. So firstly, how to make sure its operation is successful. I mean, yes, you can look at its surpluses, but this is not enough. Because the idea of running a successful charity, from the donor's point of view, for example, we need to make sure funds would go into the project rather than going into the administration, i.e. not to waste fund. Now, in my Preseen application note, I've given you a particular case called charity water. Now, charity water, I would say that it's quite a small charity compared to the larger ones. Now, why it was so successful? Because it ensures 100% of the fund of the donations would go directly to the project and making things more transparent, okay, to the donors. Now, at the same time, it heavily uses very creative marketing ideas, including, for example, setting up the birthday campaigns, allowing others to donate more, at the same time heavily using social media and digital marketing. Now, I would say that with regards to the HP charity, in the upcoming sitting, that it's time that e-marketing, let's say the 6 I's, may be ready. So make sure that you revise this area. And of course, we'll be going through them later on in our course. Now, not only for that, as you can see, the surplus, we use income minus expenditure. Now, how to expand our income stream? Now, previously in the SBL exam, the partnership idea, so for example, the strategic alliance ways, one of them may be tested, in the previous SBL exams, heavily focusing on, for example, the joint venture way. But as far as I'm concerned from the SBL syllabus, that's something that the exam question has not touched would be the motive of partnership. Now, there might be clues on the exam days exhibit telling you that, okay, in order that to make sure our financial looks healthy, and this is why HP Charity decides to enter into partnership agreements, for example, strategic alliance agreements with others. So, explain to me what would be the motive of that. Of course, if you're not referring to any sort of textbook knowledge, yes, increasing sales and something like that, but how about referring back to this charity called Charity Water? It really enters into partnership agreement with companies like Uber. Now, and Google and Apple. Now, I would like to take a look at an example of the partnership agreement with the Uber company. That why do we do this? If you're working with Uber, we are allowing not just the Uber driver to donate. I can reach his customer. So this is what I mean by scale alliance. That will be my first motive. The second motive is that we allow Uber user, which means the customers, easily donate to the charity through the app. It's like the complementary alliance. We are combining strength. You've got lots of customers, and I allow you to donate fairly easily. But please bear in mind that if HP Charity decides to do this, so possibly in the exam requirements, part A, we may need to invest in such platform. So please use SFA tests, which means the suitability, feasibility and acceptability to tell me that whether or not the investment is worthwhile. Please assess that. Of course, the second requirement, explain to me is the motive. Alternatively, you can explain these motives combining with your part A answer when you discuss about the suitability of the investment. Of course, it will improve access alliance. So in other words, you can get access to a new group of customers. So for example, younger customers using Uber services and so on. Now, this is the way that you can work with other businesses. So instead of telling you in the exam question, explain to me franchise, joint venture, this kind of stuff. Possibly this time, examining team simply asks you what would be the benefit of partnerships? What would be the motive? Yes, you can use these three stuff, okay, in your answer. So, moving on. I mean, as you can see, that we know that HP Charity was set up using companies limited by guarantee. And of course, we've got somebody called guarantor, okay? So in case the charity goes bankrupt, the guarantor will step in. I mean, we don't want to see that the charity will go bankrupt, and I don't believe that on the exam day there's a scenario talking about, okay, here's the guarantor, here's the charity going into bankruptcy. I don't believe such question may come in. But what I believe is this. There might be clues on the exam day asking you that how do we improve the performance of HP Charity? Not just we talk about the partnership idea before, but there might be a funny story that asking students to think about, there might be potential privatization issues. I mean, don't get me wrong, HP Charity currently in the Preseen is not owned by the government. Although, yes, it works with government and something like that. I mean, the relationship seems to me quite weird, okay, not very clear. But there might be argument among charity, government, and even the investors. Because don't forget that the HP Charity acquired site from the previous owners, and there should be conflict, okay, in terms of the negotiation process. There might be issues related to the due diligence phase. Now, a famous example happened in Italy about the potential privatization by its government is the charity called Cassa Depositi Prestiti, or we can call it as the CDP. Now, in Italy, at that particular moment in time, what happened is that CDP's efficiency was quite poor and utilizing lots of government's funds. So therefore, the Italian bank and even the private equity firms step in to save that charity. So, if this is the case then, the governance structure of the CDP will change. Now, here the HP Charity, that the governance structure will be operated using a two-tier structure. However, for a CDP, it uses multi-tier. So for example, government still retains 50% more shares and to carry out the oversight role by setting up the future strategy of this charity. Now, not only for that, government will have the golden share. And, I mean, to veto, which means that we can ban key decisions simply using the golden share from a government's point of view for a high-risk investment. And that will be the tier number 1 there. Now, the tier number 2 is to make decisions And tier number 3 will be to execute it. Okay, is the operational management. So we've got government here, we've got the decision-making board and the operational layer who implement this. Now, I would say that is fine. Now, in the decision-making tier here, or the layer here, it also includes the private sector representatives, which means for example, the private equity firms, investors, okay, in here. So you can see that by changing a structure such as this, there might be a potential exam question asking you to comment on the complicated relationship, the principal and agent relationship. Right, so if this is the case then, what we need to think about is the public there. So firstly, we'll always say that the public is our principal because it will tell us what to do. Now, for example, the public will tell the decision-making board what to do, and the principal will certainly check and to inspect, scrutinize the operational tier of how they've been doing things well or not. So this means that in terms of a complicated principal and agent relationship, the decision-making board will certainly be the agent, and the operational board will be the agent again. So we can talk about first and second relationship there, such as this. Now, not only for that, we also have got the government and decision-making boards, so which means that government in this case will certainly be the principal because I'm the boss and I determine what will be the future strategy and so on, and to decide how to do it. It's like, when we talk about strategies, there will be a pyramid there, okay? Corporate strategy, business strategy, operational strategies. Yes, this structure operates the same thing. And of course, the decision-making board will certainly be the agent, okay? Listen to the government of what to do, for example. Now, not only for that, please do remember, if on the exam day, if we decide to save HP charity, we decided to change its, for example, companies limited by guarantee to something else. We introduce, for example, the private equity firms in, and to further commercialize it, okay, commercialize the activities, bringing more surplus and so on. So if this is the case, then we'll need to look at the representatives from the decision board. So in other words, we are talking about the shareholders, which means that the PE firms operating this entity would guarantee or to distribute return back to shareholders. So if this is the case, then these private equity or the PE investors, they are the agent and working for the principal, the boss of shareholders, for example. I will talk about the individual shareholders rather than the large shareholder in most circumstances there, because individual shareholders will buy the securities, okay, issued by the companies such as this. Now, 4-tier principal agent problem, so please read them very carefully in terms of transparency, in terms of how we make sure that your action will be in line with my interests, and that's very, very important. Right, now, moving on, that's enough. Another point from the Preseen that charities' activities are determined by their governing document called Constitution. And of course, if you're the company, limited by shares, you also have got your Constitution. Can you change that? Well, the answer is yes, you can change it. There's no point simply saying that here's the constitution unchanged. No. I mean, let me show you a real life example here. And this example talks about historic England, okay? By acquiring the Bloomsbury house, okay, in many years ago. At that particular time, that the shareholders of the Bloomsbury house decided to redevelop the building into a high-end hotel and office space. The reason is, by doing this, we can rent this property out and to get income, having quick returns. However, at that time, the government representatives of historic England said that this is not possible, and they opposed to the idea. Now, who actually wins eventually? I would say that the key private shareholders, such as the Barclays Bank and representatives from major investment groups, they won the battle. They eventually redeveloped the building into, yes, the office space, for example, in the end. So in this particular case, why did historic England fail? Well, I would say that historic England here, in this case, did not have a final say. So this is why, after this event happening, historic England's constitution was changed. So for example, government has a leading role in ensuring that what can be done, what can't be done. Now, not only for that, it introduced standards for evaluating returns by balancing, very importantly, by balancing the culture and the return, okay, before things would go ahead. At the same time, government representatives are granted with veto right, okay, ensuring that the heritage will not be compromised under market pressure. So what I want to tell you is that the constitution can change. So because of the things happening there. So you would expect lots of conflict when we acquire site from the previous owner on the exam day. Right, moving on. Many charities raise funds by means of surpluses from commercial activities. Well, I would say that the subsidiary within our group will be undertaking all these functions. Now, if this is the case, then an exam question may be for the subsidiary talking about the strategy. So what do you think? Well, there will be lots of ways that we can grow the business. Using organic growth by ourselves, using mergers and acquisitions to buy others, and to grow the business using strategic alliances. So possibly for the subsidiary, for example, because it also sells other products. So looking at this particular business is called SATCO. Using joint ventures, for example, with the external retail partners, sharing profits and selling things, running charity stores or charity shops. I mean, the advantage for that will certainly be to reduce the investments that you need to put in place initially. And this will save you a lot of cash and help with your liquidity. And that's good for the HP charity there. So there might be a possibility there, so make sure that you're ready. But what's more important is this. We are a company limited by guarantee. And decision makers usually that if you are making mistakes, not fraud, making mistakes, absolutely fine. Okay, I will leave you to go. For example, you can leave the business, okay, without being punished in most circumstances. However, if the internal control system is poor, of course, public's money or the public interest will not be protected. So a very good example for this is the Ponzi fraud done by the person called Bernie Madoff. It's the charity scandal happening in the USA. Now, of course, the Ponzi scheme works like this. At that time, it seems to be quite a successful investment company, claiming that we can diversify the portfolio, we use very good technique to reduce risk and to maximize return. So please give me your money, I can guarantee your return. However, after I receive your money, I mean, I'm not Bernie Madoff. I mean, after Bernie Madoff, received money from different investors, including charities, including a lot of charities that they invested monies in the scheme. I mean, after he received the money, he used the monies to pay off the previous investor. We take money from a new investor to pay the old investor. Works like this. Eventually, in 2008, the Ponzi scheme collapsed, and estimating $65 billion. Wow, not $65. $65 billion were lost. Of course, a lot of charities were involved. Oh my God. Oh my God. I mean, these charities invested money in the Ponzi scheme. Did you perform due diligence in terms of the investment? Okay, hold on a second. In terms of running a charity, we get income from donors and we run the shops and sell things, and to get income, we pay off the expenditure. Well, do you have money left? Well, the answer is yes. We've got money left, we can invest in somewhere else to generate higher return. But we will need to spend these monies subsequently in later periods, rather than redistribute it to shareholders, because we don't have shareholders in this sort of charity form. So if this is the case, then an exam question for this, maybe it's time for the internal control. How you would improve your internal control. Now, I talked to one of my students a few days ago that he worked in the charity before. Now, he admitted that internal control will be very, very key in charity. When he was handling the audit stuff, he always need to revise the internal control before the external auditor came in. So this is why I would like to use my own mnemonic again, called CCRIM. For example, we'll need to make sure zero tolerance for the financial mismanagement, in our control environment. We need to ensure that our control procedures, for example, if you want to spend money out, you need to have the pre-approved budget, and exceeding 10%, needing board level approval, for example. Risk management, you will need to document all the fraud risk, which means the fraud risk register. You will need to ensure that the information will be transparent to the donor and to the affected parties. You will need to monitor that. For example, establishing the internal audit team, but I can't see any clues currently at HP Charity. So make sure that you're ready. Now, my view is this. Usually, audits in this sector would just to be to audit the account rather than to check whether or not your internal control will be effective. Although in the Preseen that we are told in terms of the charity regulation that we are regulated by the CSB established by central government, and making sure that your donation will be for proper purposes, and it will investigate whether or not the action will be against the objective, behaving unethically. At the same time, you will need to publish the financial statement, per the accounting standard, and larger charities such as the HP charity here will need to report on internal control. So in real life, of course, audit seems to be serve as the formality. I mean, it's quite different from the audit in public listed companies. So this means that although the CSB is our regulatory body, now what we need to do from a stakeholders management point of view is to keep it satisfied, because yes, it did have high power. However, in charity, in terms of the account, I mean, information was not so transparent. Okay, and that's the first thing. In terms of the money spent, at the same time, it has low interest, okay, in HP charity, because it's not involved in a daily operation in our HP charity, just check the result. So keeping it satisfied, making sure that we will need to continuously improve our internal control, and that will be the very key there. So therefore, I would expect an exam question related to internal control, particularly for the internal control report content. And of course, I will show you later on in my course. Now, moving on. Let's see the heritage subsector here. Right. Now, many charities preserve the heritage at urban and rural sites, especially that we are talking something about the cultural value will be high in the city or in the country. We also maintain historical sites and the object. Now, I would like to tell you more about this in a second. But what I want to say is to refer it back to the real life example here, is how we think about the CSR, or the corporate social responsibility there. It's all about the stakeholders management, although it also involves, for example, that we need to look after the environment, society, profit, and so on. But let's look at the example, the real life case from London Dockland back in 1980s. Now, at that time, the UK government worked with London Docklands Development Corporation for the redevelopment project for the Docklands area of London. Now, this was the old phase, this is the new phase. Now, at that time, we would like to redevelop the area so we can turn that to be more of a modern area to boost the economy. But at the same time, we'll need to relocate some of the long-term residents. So this is what at that time, many long-term residents and even some of the preservation organizations and other parties were opposed to the proposal. However, finally, the government won. However, it adopted the stakeholder management approach, or the authentic leadership approach, to manage all the stakeholders quite well. I would say that on the exam that you may be given these sort of hints in the exhibit. Just comment on those, okay? Just answer the question in the right way. So for example, at that time, government decided to preserve historic buildings, providing compensations for the displaced residents, and increase investment in the local cultural and educational activities and initiatives. So, by adopting such stakeholders management approaches, it would be seen that we are ethical. Okay, so when you talk about ethics in the exam, always to look out for any hints in the exhibit before you comment about those. Right, okay, so I think that's enough. But in the next of our section onwards, I will also touch on not only for the site, don't forget about the object. That's also important. This will also lead to many conflicts that may be coming up as additional background information on the exam day. So make sure that you watch out. I look forward to your exam success very soon. Best of luck.
APC, accounting for your future.